Deal or no deal? That is the big question these days. President Trump is talking about how there's going to be a deal in a couple of days. Yesterday, he was in the Oval Office and he was saying, "Yeah, we're going to have a signing ceremony in Europe in a couple of days, and it's a great deal to end the hostilities, end the war. It's wonderful." And then today, he puts out a tweet with that the Iranians are stalling things and that what they're saying about the deal is not true. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at what did President Trump actually say today, and what did the Iranians claim is in the deal? What is their state media saying about why there is no deal? And we're going to get a handle on this situation. To get us started, we're going to go to one of our favorites, one of our trusted analysts, and that is General Jack Keane. Here we go. General Keane on Fox this morning.
General, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And the president says VP J.D. Vance will be in Europe this weekend, potentially to sign a deal. But of course, we've been here before. Your reaction?
Right. Well, we have been here many times before, but the reason we're here now is because the president was willing to use military operations to leverage the Iranians to get serious about a deal. And it appears that has put us on a pathway to signing this framework agreement. Now, remember, the framework agreement would likely open up the Straits of Hormuz with Iran not having any control. We would eventually also, over time, release our naval blockade. But then the framework and the agreement, much of the challenges of the nuclear enterprise, removing it, not permitting enrichment, the ballistic missile development, the drone inventory, and support for proxies, that would all begin a 60-day clock to negotiate. So there's a lot of work ahead here. And I think the leverage of getting back using military force has accomplished this. And I wouldn't be surprised, Maria, if we didn't have to do it again. Because look at right now, within 24 hours, we're seeing what we've heard before. The people that talk to the president from Iran tell him one thing, and then we have other officials in the government right now saying, well, we haven't agreed to X, Y, and Z. We're not going to do that. So there's always this inconsistency coming from Iran in terms of what they say. And then when it comes down to what they do, well, let's face it, what they do is completely different than what they say. They said ceasefire 2 months ago, and they have violated that time and time again, firing into the Straits of Hormuz, firing at U.S. bases, firing at our allies and partners in the region, and certainly unleashing Hezbollah inside of Lebanon to over 2,000 rockets and drone attacks into northern Israel, forcing the evacuation of those towns and villages. This is who Iran really is. And it's going to take the leverage of military force to hold their feet to the fire. We're in the early stages of a process here. And the president and his team, listen, they're clear-eyed. They know who they're dealing with here. They know they're dealing with liars, and they know they're dealing with cheaters, and they know that they're dealing with people, Maria. At the end of the day, what does Iran really want here? They want to go back to where they were. That's a fact. And they'll say anything to get there. And they'll sign anything to get there. So what they really need from us is they want us to give them money, get them flush with money so they can recover, and then they'll go about reversing everything that they agree to do.
Right.
And so the deal itself has to go into it with that in mind, so it endures past the current president of the United States. They know this. They know what the Iranians are up to because this is the first administration that has ever confronted them in any consequential way. So the deal has to have provisions in it that prevent a reversal. And the administration is very well aware of that. And Iran will fight and oppose any of those kind of terms that will hold their feet to the fire and not give them the ability to go right back where they were when the war started. That's who these guys are, and that's what they want out of this.
Yeah, and, you know, Iran's state media and their propaganda is out there just throwing out different items to see what sticks. Like, for example, one headline earlier was about the uranium and a speculation that the president would allow the uranium to stay in Iran. how important is it for the U.S. to get what they want in terms of that uranium? And also, General, as SpaceX is ready to debut on the NASDAQ today, everyone's talking about this big IPO. Iran is reportedly planning to treat all of Elon Musk's companies as, quote unquote, military targets. Iran state media claims Elon Musk's holdings were used by the U.S. military to, quote, carry out war crimes. And I'll just point out that this is all happening from Iran planning to treat Elon Musk's companies as military. The U.S. is clamping down on more Chinese companies, designating companies like Alibaba.
All right. At this point, the interview goes into China, and I don't want to deal with that. We got what we want from this piece here. So what we see is, General Jack Keane has got it exactly right. And if you've been watching this channel, you know exactly what this is. We see through it. We roll our eyes. The Iranians buy time. Oh, we have a deal. We have a deal. We have a deal. Well. All they want is to buy time. Now, General Keane makes a very important point here, and we're going to see it come up later on, even in the Iranian state media analysis, which is that any deal here has to not trust their word. They are liars and cheaters. So a deal, even if you're going to make a deal, it has to have assurances in there that there can be no backtracking and that what is supposed to happen actually happens, meaning it has to be based on actions, not based on commitments. Keep that in mind as we take a look at what happened next. So this was early this morning, and then we had this Truth Social post from President Trump. Check this out. It says here, the terms that Iran leaked out to the fake news have nothing to do with the terms that we agreed to in writing. What they said, including their weak and pathetic statement on having a deal, bears no relation to the truth. Very dishonorable people to deal with. With them, there is no such thing as dealing in good faith. Amazing. Also, well, it's nice that he finally figured that out. There's no such thing as dealing in good faith. Also, their totally rebuffed drone attack last night against Indian ships leaving the Hormuz Strait is totally unacceptable. They better get their act together and fast, President Donald J. Trump. So what did they actually claim? So this is from today, from Iranian state media, details of the proposed 14-point Iran-U.S. draft agreement. This is what they claim the details of the agreement are. Check this out. This is amazing to read. A source, because Trump hasn't revealed what the details of the agreement are. He even keeps saying anyone who says they know doesn't know. It's not being made public. So here we have the Iranian state media putting out a 14 points. They're claiming that this is the deal. A source close to the Iranian nuclear negotiating team has leaked the details of a proposed 14-point draft memorandum of understanding between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States. Has leaked, as though it's free media and there's a journalist who got a leak. This is the Iranian state. What did they say is in it? The framework outlines a phased de-escalation plan and the parameters for a potential comprehensive treaty. The 14-point draft framework. Here we go. Immediate ceasefire, an immediate and permanent cessation of military hostilities across all regional fronts, especially including Lebanon. Whoa. Israel has to stop fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon? That ain't going to happen. Sovereignty guarantees. Sorry about that. A binding U.S. commitment to non-interference in Iran's internal affairs and strict respect for the national sovereignty of the Islamic Republic. Well, that's kind of tricky, right? A commitment to not interfere in Iran's internal affairs. What does that mean? That you can oppress your people? You can start murdering protesters? You can do whatever you want internally? No. That's also probably not going to happen. Remember, Israel's not party to this. Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear that Israel's not party to any of this, which is why the Lebanon clause is never going to happen. Lifting of naval blockades, the total removal of naval blockades within a 30-day window. Troop withdrawal, a U.S. commitment to withdraw its military forces from the immediate periphery of Iran. Strait of Hormuz, check this one out. The reopening of the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days to be operated under finalized Iranian regulatory arrangements and protocols. No, that is a red line for the Americans. We hear Rubio say it all the time. We hear Trump say it. There's no way. This is international waters. The Iranians have no right whatsoever to have regulatory arrangements and protocols controlling the Strait. In other words, this, according to them, the agreement leaves them in control of the Strait of Hormuz. Sanctions suspension. The suspension of economic sanctions on Iran's sale of crude oil, petrochemical products, and petroleum derivatives, alongside granting Iran full access to its foreign financial revenues. Reconstruction aid. This is laughable. A requirement for the United States and its allies to present comprehensive reconstruction plans for Iran, valued at a minimum of $300 billion. Comprehensive final talks, a structured 60-day negotiation window to reach a final treaty based on nuclear matters, and the permanent repeal of all primary and secondary U.S. sanctions, the permanent repeal of all the sanctions, UN Security Council resolutions, and IAEA Board of Governors resolutions. They all have to be repealed, meaning the IAEA can't inspect anything. There's no more UN Security Council resolutions against them, nothing. And it's all this commits to is a structured 60-day negotiation window about the nuclear matters. Non-proliferation treaty commitments, a reiteration of Iran's standing pledge under the non-proliferation treaty prohibiting the acquisition or manufacture of nuclear weapons, blah, blah, blah. Freeze on hostilities, a U.S. commitment to halt any military deployment increases in the region and refrain from enacting new economic sanctions during the designated negotiation period, tying America's hands, meaning during the negotiating period, America cannot put any pressure, neither through sanctions nor through military threats, nothing. We will not have any pressure on us during the negotiating period. Yeah, right. Release of blocked assets, the repatriation of $24 billion in frozen Iranian assets over the course of the 60-day final negotiation window, meaning even before we finalize the agreement on the nuclear stuff, you're already releasing our assets, with half, $12 billion, made fully accessible to Iran prior to the commencement of talks, meaning we get $12 billion up front before anything else happens. Joint monitoring, the establishment of a dedicated supervisory mechanism to oversee compliance and implement the provisions of the agreement. UN enforcement, that should make you laugh. Formal ratification of the definitive final agreement via an official United Nations Security Council resolution. And preconditions and agenda constraints. Final negotiations will strictly not begin until three conditions are met: the release of half the frozen assets, the lifting of the naval blockade, and the suspension of oil sanctions. Those have to happen before any negotiations begin. Furthermore, the scope of the final agreement is strictly limited to the status of enriched materials, enrichment capacities, sanctions removal, and Iran's economic reconstruction. Meaning the final agreement will only be the final, meaning the only things we're even willing to make an agreement about, the only things we're even willing to talk about during the 60 days is the enriched uranium, enrichment capacities, sanctions removals, and Iran's economic reconstruction. Discussions regarding Iran's ballistic missile program or its support for regional resistance groups, the proxies, are permanently excluded from the agenda. In line with statements from the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, this text remains a draft proposal. It's currently undergoing rigorous evaluation and final review by relevant national security and governing bodies within Iran before any formal adoption. Folks, this is what the Iranians are claiming the deal is. It's basically, what does it mean? It means they get money up front. It means ballistic missiles we're not touching that. We're not touching the proxies. Israel stops fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. They get reconstruction aid. This is all because we're willing to talk. They get control of the Straits of Hormuz. This is what they're claiming the deal is. Now, a few hours after that, just a few hours ago, really, earlier today, the top story on WANA, on this Iranian state media, is why hasn't the deal been finalized yet? And I want to read you a piece of this. In recent weeks, every sign of progress in the talks has been accompanied by two completely different interpretations. Trump insists on portraying any potential deal as the result of American military and political pressure, which it is. According to his narrative, Iran moved closer to an agreement only after suffering hard blows. In Tehran, however, a very different story is taking shape. Reports emerging from the negotiations, including claims that Washington has returned to understandings reached 2 weeks earlier, suggest that after introducing new demands and contributing to a deadlock in the talks, the United States was ultimately forced to retreat from some of its positions. You see, there's no concept of compromise as a virtue in their culture. We've talked about this. In previous videos, we've talked about how they negotiate. They don't. We see compromise as a good thing. You move towards the other side and you get closer to making a deal. No, they see compromise as retreat. But there's a more important point in here. Let's jump down, and it talks about the 14 points and what they're saying in there. Here we go. Regardless of whether these details ultimately prove accurate, the striking feature is that nearly all the reported provisions focus on immediate and tangible actions rather than long-term promises. This is precisely where a potential new agreement differs from the JCPOA. The JCPOA was built on the assumption that gradual confidence building could reduce tensions and narrow differences. Today's prospective agreement, however, appears to rest on a fundamentally different assumption. Neither side trusts the other. This is actually accurate. The JCPOA was built on like long-term commitments, which is why it was really a path to a nuclear weapon. And they don't trust each other. And that's why whatever the current deal, if there's going to be a deal, there isn't going to be a deal, but the current deal has to be, and this is what Jack Keane was saying, it has to be based on tangible, actual fulfillment of tangible actions is what it has to be based on, because we don't trust it because these guys are liars. Now, what they mean is unfreeze our assets in advance, stop Israel from hitting Lebanon in advance, meaning that's what they mean. What America means is we're not trusting you. We're not going to get some commitment out of you for anything. We're not going to give you money before we see action on your side. Under such conditions, Tehran is seeking immediate and verifiable gains. They want the cash, while Washington is trying to preserve at least some of its leverage. In other words, these negotiations are not aimed at building trust. They are designed to manage distrust. I actually think that's accurate. Trump's media strategy can also be understood within this framework. A review of his statements since the war began shows the U.S. president has repeatedly spoken of Iran's defeat, of the country's complete destruction, of an imminent deal, and the continued openness of the Strait of Hormuz. Many of these claims were made even as developments on the ground appeared to point in a different direction. This pattern has led some analysts to argue that Trump is conducting a parallel psychological campaign alongside negotiations, a campaign aimed not at changing the agreement's text, but at shaping public perceptions of the deal. That's probably accurate. He wants to keep oil prices down. He wants to keep everyone calm. In this narrative, the United States must emerge as the winner, even if it has quietly moderated some of its demands in practice. It's moderated. You see what they're saying? Of course, they've moderated their demands. They're Westerners. When Westerners negotiate, as time goes on, you want to get a deal, you moderate your demands. But they view it as showing that they're not really the winners. To them, compromise means that you've surrendered, that you're weak, that you lack resolve, that you can't win. That may be why the most important question today is not whether an agreement will be signed. The more significant question is, if a deal is reached, who will succeed in imposing their narrative on public opinion? Okay, that's basically the key here. So you see here, folks, bottom line is this. We are no closer to a deal today than we were before. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense, okay? Yeah, the Americans hit them hard the other day, and then, now they're back at the table and make a deal. The Iranians know exactly how to play the game. The Americans hit them hard. They say, okay, we're crying uncle. And then Trump goes, okay, we got a deal. Now they're finally capitulating. And then as soon as the guns stop and they've got Trump thinking that they're about to sign a deal, then they start digging in again. It's all the same game. We've seen this before. We've been around this before. We'll see how much more of it Trump can take. But that is the situation. So if that's what they're publishing as what's in the deal, we are very, very far from this being over, folks. So don't start thinking that there's going to be a signing ceremony anytime soon. All right. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. God bless.